Welcome to Fostering True Play in your program. Tonight we will be diving into Anji play in home-based settings, and we are really excited. If you we offered this for the first time in January, and now we are offering it again tonight because there was so much interest. And for those who don't know me, I'll quick introduce myself, and then I'll turn it over to the star of tonight's presentation. But my name is Grace Eilers. I am the Family Child Care Content Specialist with Satellite Family Child Care System. And we can talk more about Satellite for those who are unfamiliar with it later on at the end of the presentation. But I want to get right into, we have with us today the only pilot home-based program in all of the United States, owner Kate Woodford. And I'll pass it over to her to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, good evening. Buenas tardes a todos. Espero que estén bien. I hope everyone's doing well tonight. My name is Kate Woodford. I live in Madison, and I've been running my in-home childcare program for almost 10 years, and I started implementing Anji Play in 2016 when I had the opportunity to go to China and visit and do a study tour and visit over 10 different Anji Play schools and learn a lot about the philosophy. And ever since, little by little, I've been incorporating into my program, and I look forward to sharing with you all tonight.
Thank you, Kate. We are so excited to have you back tonight. So before we dive into things, we are going to talk about our learning objectives for tonight's event. By the end, you should have a pretty good understanding of, we'll touch more on this later, but there are 5 interconnected principles of Anji play, and that is the foundation of the curriculum philosophy. And by the end of this, you will also hopefully walk away with a better understanding of the role of this idea of true play, which was in the title of tonight's presentation, and the role of the educator and the environment as conceptualized by the philosophy. And we are going to get into that more. And finally, and arguably the most important, you are going to have a really good understanding of what this approach can look like in a home-based setting, thanks to all of the content that Kate, the videos, the photos that Kate has provided for us tonight to see, hear, and learn from. But before we do that, we all, if you've been attending some of our other curriculum philosophy series, you will know we always start with the basics to get all of us on the same understanding of what we're talking about when we use the word curriculum. So for the purposes of tonight's presentation, when we use the word curriculum, we're referring to everything that you do in your program. So this includes your routine for the day, how you set up meal times, how often you are outside, the materials, your techniques for guidance. That includes everything you do and ultimately what children are learning as a result. So that's what we mean when we say curriculum. And we are momentarily going to disperse into a small group activity to just bring this idea to the forefront of your mind of how do you currently plan what you do. But before that, we're going to talk about this idea of philosophy. So we talked about the curriculum is what you do, and the curriculum philosophy, that's that framework that's guiding what you do in your program. So you'll also hear it referred to as an approach or a method, and it really offers that set of values to consider when you're caring for and teaching young children. And it's leading to the how of children's learning. So you are going to be, like I said, you're going to be put into small groups to discuss these 2 pieces. So think about how you plan right now, what guides you in your mission of caring for and teaching young children. And this is really going to ground all of us in what you are bringing in, what you are doing, and how you are doing it right to the forefront of your mind, which will help you better compare this new approach that we will be discussing today. So I would encourage you, if you're able to, when you go off into your breakout rooms, to turn your video on if you feel comfortable, unmute yourself, introduce yourself, connect with other professionals in your field, and really use this time. Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive into it, we are going to, and I emailed this out to you beforehand, but we are going to just rewatch it again because I think it really sets the tone of what Anji play looks like and feels like in its roots of Anji China. And that is this very calming video called This is Anji Play.
Born in the magical bamboo forests of Anji, a joyful revolution has unfolded in the kindergartens of eastern China. This film documents the story of how Anji Play returned to children the right to play as it spreads across the whole of China. As pressures increase on younger and younger children in the U.S. to perform academically, the right to play is redefining early education for a quarter of the world's children. How will China's belief in play shape the global future of education?
两个人嘴巴谁画的漂亮？
我弟弟说的。青菜，你看我的菜没？长得那么小的。
So this really all started in the late 1990s. So the Chinese government got together, they started looking at contemporary research on child development, and they saw, wow, the research is clear. Children learn through play. Young children learn through play. They're not going to be learning as much if they're sitting at a desk all day. So they started this nationwide movement. And at the same time, a woman who is on the left here, Miss Chang Shuichin, she was put in charge of the kindergarten, early childhood kindergartens. She was the administrator in a region of China called Anji, and that you can see on the map here is outlined in the black circle. It's this small rural region in China, and by 2004, just 20 years ago, she had built this wide network of, I think, over 130 kindergartens. And in China, kindergarten is for children ages 3 to 6. So she built these beautiful classrooms that had centers and that looked, from what I was reading and learning, looked a lot like what many of classrooms and centers and childcare settings look like in the US today, where they had different centers. And, you had your dramatic play area, your block area. And she went in and there were these beautiful programs. She went in and she noticed that there wasn't a lot of joy, that joy happening for these children, and she called it false play. So it just led to these questions within her of what is happening here and how can we bring back that joy in childhood. And we are going to watch a video of Miss Chang Shuo-chen speaking herself now. But before I do that, Kate, anything else you want to add about the history at all?
I don't think so. I think one thing you just mentioned, but I want to underscore, is that the children in Anji are in kindergarten, which is ages 3 to 6. So in mixed age settings or in childcare settings in the United States, oftentimes we have children much younger than the children you'll see in these videos. So we'll talk throughout the presentation about how this might apply also to toddlers and babies.
Thank you. I'm glad that you brought that up again, because I'm sure many of you, if you work with the littles, the really littles, if you have mostly toddlers and infants, you were watching that video of what Anji play looks like in China, and you saw these big ladders and big boards, and there were cooking at one point. You were probably thinking, how is this going to be relevant for me? And Kate is hopefully going to talk about those pieces later on. But first, we are going to hear from Ms. Shuo-chen.
游戏是儿童身体和心灵成长的内在需求。我们抱着让游戏点亮儿童生命的坚定信念，进行了一场历时15年的把游戏的权利还给孩子的革命。这场游戏革命，让我们发现了了不起的儿童，让我们学会了去理解和尊重儿童，让我们懂得了童年是值得崇拜、值得敬畏、值得被深深的爱的。
And this was the question that Ms. Chang asked herself. She reflected and said, well, what are my deepest memories of play as a child? And that is what we are bringing to you today. What are your deepest memories of play as a child? If this question does not bring joyful memories to you, that's okay, and you do not have to share with others. And instead, I would ask, I forgot, I should have prefaced, we will be going into a small group activity again, just to sit with this idea. If this question does not spark joyful memories for you, you could think about, what are you noticing in the children in your program? How are they playing? So that could be another direction you could take this conversation to. Just the idea of play. What are your deepest memories, if you would feel comfortable sharing, or what do you see in the children that you are caring for and teaching now, in terms of how are they playing? What are they playing with? All right, welcome back, everyone. A reminder to choose your language channel again, because we all just left the room and we came back into our new virtual space all together again. So please choose interpretation in either English or Spanish. So I am assuming that in the conversations you just had, you probably had a similar realization that Ms. Cheng had, where she found that her deepest memories of play as a child were defined by risk, self-determination, and it took place sometimes on this grand scale, where she was handling very big materials and maybe tools. But that risk and self-determination piece, those pieces are really what made it super memorable for her. So she wanted to give that to the children in Anji, in the Anji region. And that's where Anji Play began. And we are going to talk about those 5 interconnected principles where risk is one of them. And I'll turn it over to Kate to do that.
Hi, everybody. So Anju Play is based on these 5 principles, which kind of build on each other, but also all work together in unison. So I would say that the foundation and the most important piece is this sense of love and trust between the educator and the child, the children with other children, and just the families in general in your program. And when that love and trust is established in the relationships, then children are more likely and more confident taking risks, both physical risks, but also cognitive risks and emotional risks and social risks that maybe they wouldn't feel comfortable taking if they didn't have that secure relationship foundation. And then after the children take risks in play, you see what comes from that is a deep engagement in what they're doing and a joy from having the opportunity to pursue whatever they are desiring in the moment. And then there's this piece of reflection that's really important because when children reflect on their play and their experiences, they have the opportunity to really internalize them more deeply and establish a foundation for then what their subsequent learning is built from. So true play is sort of the term we use a little bit interchangeably with Anji Play because Anji Play really emphasizes this term true play. What does that mean? It means long extended periods of self-directed, uninterrupted, unguided play, right? That lets them take risks, enjoy what they're doing, really get engaged in something. And having these extended periods of time where they can basically do whatever they want to do and without the teacher or the adult's agenda, it gives them the opportunity to really dive deeply into the learning that is engaging and important to them, especially. And I think what's really important to keep in mind when we make space for true play is that as the educator, we have to really have a deep sense of trust in the children that they will learn, right? Will learn despite us giving them the answer or telling them how to do it or showing them or explaining to them what it is they need to learn. Something that I think is really something that I understood when I went to Anji is that, so I studied my bachelor's in human development and early childhood education, and I did my master's degree in bilingual education. And we teach in Spanish exclusively in my program. But I think after having studied all of these formal philosophies and pieces about education, they teach a very linear type of learning, right? You first learn one thing, then the next thing, then the next thing. And so as educators, we're taught to kind of check off these boxes and see how they progress through time in a line, kind of. Or in steps, maybe you could think about it. And what I've realized is that when you step back and let children guide their own learning, oftentimes they can show you that they're learning something way beyond what you would expect of them, maybe at that point of time. So it's kind of throwing away this linear type of expectation and really just opening your mind to the fact that children may be learning way beyond what we expect of their age or of their own developmental stage, I guess.
I just want to add one thing, Kate, and just to put it into historical context too, where a lot of these philosophies, there's been this push and pull of, what is the role of the educator? And I just want to put it into context because it wasn't until very recently that a large majority of children were in out-of-home care out of home-based settings this young. You know, if you think about 100 years ago, children weren't beginning education or formal schooling until what, 8 years old. So we've had to, as a society, we've really developed what it means early childhood education. And for me, learning about and watching Anji play and this idea of true play in action, it's really bringing back that idea of uninterrupted, unguided, self-determined play to children that is natural and is what's needed for them to grow into healthy, holistic human beings. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's why I was originally attracted to this philosophy, because I've always known, as I've worked with children for most of my life, you know, starting with babysitting and summer camps and in preschools and in elementary school, what I've seen is that children are going to learn despite us, right? No matter what we do or we try to teach them, they're always going to be learning something, whether or not it's what we expect of them in the moment. And so I think by opening the space for children to really show us what they want to learn, how they want to learn, and what's interesting to them really can show us a lot about the individual child. And I know a lot of people were talking about when they were establishing their philosophies or their teaching style, it's really focused on the individual child and what they're interested in or what they, you know, are drawn to. And this philosophy, this teaching style really lends to seeing each child for who they are as an individual and what their interests are. And so it's a really great way to be able to understand, you know, what, you know, understand and build on or help support each child in what they are learning at the moment.
A lot of like fundamental, deep respect for children is all over this philosophy. I'm going to play this video, Kate. I love an example of true play in action.
This group is between 1 and 8 years old.
Like this. Como esto me aquí. Mira. No, no, así, así. No, así.
A ver. Oh, mucho mejor. A ver. Ahora sí.
Yo quiero jugar también. Mira. And you need to try to catch the ball.
I like that video and I wanted to throw that in there, Kate, just because of the engagement of all these children of different ages together, just doing something that they probably, tell me more about this. Did they just spontaneously decide to start using it as sort of a bowling alley?
Yeah, so we want to welcome all of you to put something in the chat while we're watching. We're going to watch a few different videos, and we welcome you to kind of put, what do you notice about the children in these videos? What do you notice about their play? You know, what objective observations do you have? Like I said, there's children from 1 to 8 years old engaging with the same open-ended material. And so if you take a look at just one child at a time, you can kind of see very different things that they're, different ways that they're engaging and their different purposes in the play. And I think it's just a great example of how minimally structured environments and minimally structured toys actually give space for much more depth in learning and a wider array of learners.
I know for me, and I see we have some chat messages coming in, I just noticed that little one in the back just watching, taking it all in. I see, I'm just pulling up the chat so I can read. They are all staying happily engaged. Take the old slide and using it for fine motor skills. Terrific idea. And they are so happy. And Tracy says it's a mixed age group, but handling it well. It is so true. And while you're thinking about that, we are going to watch another video.
Pide ayuda a Queenie otra vez.
Are you also seeing the chat messages, Kate, as they come in? Yeah. No arguing between children, easygoing, relaxed play. Could you help me with the Spanish one, Kate?
Says the baby who was on the top of the car was observing, and the little boy at the top of the slide space was lighting up with happiness.
Yeah. Just a couple great examples of this idea of true play. And to the untrained eye, it probably just looks like unorganized, like what are they learning? But there's so much, right, Kate, that's happening there.
In this video, you could see there were a couple kids who were needing help. And so they were asking me for help, first of all, but part of the way that I encourage them to trust each other and play is by encouraging them to help each other and ask for support from their peers as well.
Another example of lots of joy, risk involved in that. And this is from Kate's program.
I'm sure many of you have a lot of this similar open-ended materials, right? Like stumps and logs and rocks and, wooden cubes. We have some Anji Play specific materials in our program, but most of the materials we have are things that can be sourced anywhere, a lot that have been sourced secondhand. And I think the most important thing is just that they have the freedom to, move them around and use them in multiple different ways. We don't have any fixed structures in our program as a way for the children to kind of build their own climbing and play spaces, as you can see in this photo of the little boy jumping.
And just another example of that engagement.
Yeah, and we provide the children with outdoor gear, which I'm sure many of you have in your program, so that they can get out in all seasons, all days of the year, unless it's very cold or tornadoes. And I think that also provides sort of this level of freedom to explore the environment in all different ways, because the environment changes in Wisconsin so much throughout the year.
And there's risk involved in that too. Going
Absolutely.
outside in the rain or when it's really cold.
Or icy.
Yeah, yes. So now we are going to transition to talking about the role of you as the educator. And to start us off, oh, and before we even dive into it, thank you all for your comments, your participation. It's helping in sharing your thoughts, because that's a perspective that you have. And if you hold that, it can't be shared with others. And we know that many of you are joining us today with a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience about child development. So it helps add to the experience of others when you participate and share your thoughts. So we appreciate it a lot. And we're going to be talking, well, Kate's going to be talking a lot about this idea of the role of the educator in children's uninterrupted, unstructured, free play. And before we do that, we are going to take a moment. We will have another 7-minute breakout room, small group activities, just to reflect on how you currently show up, either currently engage or maybe you don't engage with children's free play. So do you sit back and observe? Do you guide children's play? Do you play with them? Ask questions? And it's important to note that there is currently no single right answer to your style for engaging with children. This activity is, again, just to get you thinking about how you currently act during free play or choice time or whatever you want to call it, those moments of unstructured play where children have the freedom to choose what they engage in. And then we're going to compare it to how Anji Play looks at the role of the educator. So I am now turning to Amy. Could you please open up the breakout rooms for 7 minutes?
I sure will. All right, here we go. The rooms are open now, and we'll see you back here in 7 minutes.
And now we are going to hear Janelle. She is the program owner of Honey Pie Nature Play School, and she answered this question for me. And we are going to hear her response because I thought it was fitting for the Anji Play philosophy. All right, well, thank you so much, Janelle. My first question for you is, how are you present during children's free play?
So best way I describe this to families is I'm there, but I'm not there. I am present, obviously, physically and sight and sound. But I'd like to take a step back so that I can really do my job, which is to make sure that the children are safe, but also watch them, observe them, take mental notes, physical notes, because we're a play-based program. Our programming is based off of their development and off of their interests. So my job in my program is just to kind of stand back, kind of take it all in, watch them, listen to them, step in as necessary. If conflicts arise between the children, I kind of still try to bite my tongue and stand back and see if they can handle it themselves. Obviously, younger kids might need a little bit more help or suggestions, might need some modeling from me, but I just kind of wait and see where they take it and then intervene as necessary. I use the environment as a third teacher. So a lot of, planning the environment, looking at where they're mainly interested in playing each day, what items they're interested in, and then arranging the environment to reflect that. So technically I have two teachers in the program. So yeah, we use a lot of the environment, just kind of me stepping back and, jumping in, making comments as necessary, but also just letting them take the lead, and trying again to keep my mouth shut and just watch their play unfold. It's been wonderful since I've switched to that. I used to be very much teacher led. We're going to do art at this time, circle time at this time, and just the beauty of it, of child-led play is just it's so magical to watch their play unfold, and it makes my job less stressful, making it, not having it teacher oriented, teacher led.
Yeah, and for those who will be watching this, I have seen Janelle's program, and the children are so engaged, and the atmosphere is calm. You can feel it. You can feel a difference. And I think a lot of that is just your way of stepping back and allowing them to just explore at their own pace. And it's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
just the amount of time that I saw your children engaged in activities and bouncing ideas off of each other, and even the little ones. It was beautiful to watch.
Yes.
Genuinely beautiful.
Yeah, I was just telling parents last week, we were off for almost 2 weeks during winter break, and that Tuesday coming back, day after New Year's Day, I was so nervous. I'm like, oh gosh, they're going to be out of routine and they're going to be crabby and tired, but they weren't. I mean, they came in happy as can be. We had a few that were a little tired, but after 5 or 10 minutes and more kids arriving, they just jumped right back into their play, like not even a day had passed.
Yeah, I'm sure they missed all of
and
their
They did,
materials.
yes, they did. And we had new materials out too, so that made it a little more interesting for them. But yeah, I mean, I have mostly 2s and 3s, and you wouldn't be able to tell because they play so well together. And I think a lot of that is because, you know, again, just me stepping back, letting them take the lead, setting up the environment to reflect their interests and their needs and their development, and just being there when they need me. So
Yeah, and you provide that flexibility for the little ones too,
yeah,
who are not necessarily ready to engage fully in a full-blown teacher-led activity.
yeah,
They just rather do their own thing and play
yep,
and watch others and observe. So it's beautiful to watch. Thank you for sharing.
yeah.
Kate, I'm sure you would agree with me. It sounds like Janelle was talking so much about many of the components of the Anji philosophy that we've already covered so far.
Absolutely. And it sounds like the way she interacts in her program is very aligned with the Anji true play philosophy as well.
Right. So I am quickly just going to touch on two of those of the 5 interconnected principles. This idea that Kate already talked about earlier, that the educator, the biggest role that they play is to facilitate that love, that responsive, reliable, and consistent, those consistent environments and relationships. So that's the experience of being trusted, heard, seen, and respected as well. And then also this um, other principle that we haven't touched on too much yet, but we are going to with a really fantastic way of doing this in an age-appropriate way, this idea of reflection. So that's the process of thinking about, interpreting, and understanding experiences and information. And so many new experiences are happening for young children. So that is really the role of the educator. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kate to talk about really to answer the question that we've just been talking about is during that unstructured time, what's the role of the educator in that during that time?
So in Anji Play, what Ms. Chung tells all the teachers in the schools in Anji is to step back with your hands down, your mouth closed, your eyes open, ears open, and heart open. And it might sound harsh to say, you know, keep your mouth shut. But sometimes when we can be quiet, even if it's for just 30 seconds longer or a minute longer and not step in to intervene or to solve a problem for a child, we're giving them so much more space and opportunity for learning. So if you think about children who are engaged in conflict, now I'm not talking about dangerous situations, because of course in dangerous situations, the educator should be stepping in and making sure that the child doesn't actually physically get hurt. But many times, you know, especially thinking about toddlers, you know, who are fighting over a toy or taking something from someone else, it's a constant, right? And the teacher stepping in and solving that problem for them in the moment is helpful, but in the long run, it isn't serving them to be able to solve their own problems, to know what to do in a moment of conflict. And so one of the big jobs as an educator, and what I've learned over these many years that I've been implementing the Anji Play philosophy, is that this is the hardest part, stepping back with your hands down and your mouth shut. Right. And we're not talking about just letting the kids play to the side while you are doing something else, like, you know, preparing the food or changing a diaper. That's different. We're talking about being present with the children and observing their play during these long periods of uninterrupted, self-directed play. We're listening to what they're saying. We're watching what they're interested in. And we have our heart open to what this might be for their growth and development. When we give the children, Now, when children are first learning how to talk, right, you might think about needing that language input. And while it's very important that children do have opportunity for talking and hearing adults speaking, when they're playing, they're hearing other children speaking. They're imitating what other children say. And sometimes as the adult, we want to model maybe a problem-solving strategy or some words that they may use to assert themselves in a situation, like stop or I don't like that, right? And this is not to say that that is not important as well, but something that we try to encourage is just taking that extra 30 seconds to a minute and just observing what happens, right? If the two children are pulling a toy from each other, what would happen if I don't intervene for a moment, right? Will they actually get hurt? You know, it might be frustrating as the adult to see the more, you know, the stronger child always get the toy, but is that hurting anyone? Probably not, right? Unless they were to, you know, hit the other person with the toy. That's a whole nother story. But something that this is a story that I love to share because when I was in China, something that was the most astonishing to me was some of these schools, these kindergartens from 3 to 6 years old might have, you know, 600 children. And during their free play time, they took out, you know, thousands of blocks on the playground. And then the teachers would turn on the cleanup song and the children would just clean up all by themselves and the teachers didn't participate. And I, at the time, had a group of mostly 2-year-olds, like 1, 2, and 3-year-olds. And I came home thinking that's never going to work. There's no way that these kids are going to clean up on their own, right? And still, of course, they need support. But I decided that what I was going to do is I was going to start singing our cleanup song and just wait 5 minutes to see what happened, right? It didn't matter if it took us 10 minutes to clean up or 20 minutes to clean up. So for me, it was more of an experiment. And so I just stepped back and I started one day singing the cleanup song. And about 1 minute in, there was a little girl who was about 15 months old at the time. And she went over and she folded up the picnic blanket and carried it over and put it in the shelf. And that was something that I will never forget because it was something that I would have never expected of her. I would have never thought that she was capable of that. I would have never expected her to do that on her own. And yet she showed me what she was capable of, what she knew, how she could, you know, do these things without me. And so that was one of the things that really stood out to me to help encourage me to continue to practice this, you know, hands down, mouth closed, eyes open, ears open, heart open. Because by observing this, I could really open my heart to the fact that, you know, I can trust kids more than I thought I could, or, you know, they're much more capable. And then, of course, you know, there are children who don't want to clean up, and that's like a whole nother, you know, that's a whole nother way of encouragement. But it's possible that things may change and surprise you if we just give children the space to show us what they're capable of. And I think that this is something that I always have to kind of go back to myself and remember when I have this urge to, you know, intervene or to say something, even like good job or look what you did. You know, if I just let it be, what will happen next? You know, it's a little bit kind of a way to look at your own curiosity as well as an educator when you observe the children in your program. So we're going to watch a few videos coming up of children in my program. Both, I think the youngest is 1, and then there's a couple 2-year-olds as well. And we invite you in the chat if you want to share something that you notice or a moment in which you may have wanted to step in or not. So I hope you enjoy.
Hey, before we get into it, would you please tell the story about, because it's just stuck with me. You had once shared that when you went over to China, there was a child who just wouldn't clean up
Oh, yeah.
and wouldn't clean up. And, you know, us as adults and educators were like, well, what's going on here? What can we do? And I'll let you tell the story before we get into this, just because I want everyone else to hear it because it stuck with me.
Absolutely. So when I visited China, it was a study tour specifically about Anji play. So we visited 10 different schools of very different sizes, and our job was really just to observe different parts of the day. So we saw some children engaged in play, and this particular day, it was time to clean up. And what you could see was there were all these children cleaning up, and some of the children would play as they cleaned up, and some of the children would be very diligently, stacking the blocks and taking them over. And there was a child who was kind of like flitting around with a piece of paper rolled up in his hand. And we were kind of watching to see what was going on. And he was, walking over to some kids. I couldn't speak the language, so I didn't know exactly what they were saying, but I was observing what was happening. And he was moving from group to group as people were cleaning up. And at the end of play, we saw what was on his paper, which was kind of like a drawing of the whole play scene. And it seemed, when I was asking the interpreter what was going on, it seemed that he was kind of like directing the cleanup time as well, right? And so his role in play was very much a director role. He was not actually involved in any of the building or any of the cleaning up, but his role was, equally valued in that situation. And it was very different than, the children who will like go hide when it's cleanup time. I know all of you know those children. And sometimes, what I'll do in my program is say like, oh, like everyone, let's pick a, like, what do you, sometimes when everything's out, it's very overwhelming, right? But if you can, just ask children, okay, what do you want to work on putting away right now? Or what do you want to be doing right now? Sometimes that's enough of a direction for them to make that decision, and it be sort of a self-directed playtime as well.
Thank you for sharing, Kate. I just think about how from the outset, just as an observer looking in, how things aren't always what they seem, like in that story. We are very quick to make assumptions and judgments, and many of us are very focused on this idea of fairness, like everyone has to clean up and everyone has to pick up at least 5 toys, or you made the mess, you help clean it up. So just taking a step back and waiting that 30 seconds to a minute just to get even more information. But
And another thing that I want to mention, while the children are playing, while we're observing, just with our eyes open and our ears open, our heart open, we're also taking a lot of photos and videos, because as teachers in the space, it's helpful for us to go back and reflect and watch the children play, and you can kind of see more from a different perspective what's going on in play, right? In the moment, you may have to be keeping your eye on all these little kids, making sure they're not falling, but you might not notice the child who's really engaged over here by themselves. And so sometimes by taking videos, you can go back and reflect on, oh, this child, they're taking a risk in play in this way, or they're engaging in a new way that I haven't seen before, or, noticing the different roles children are taking, right? Are they choosing to play with others? Are they choosing to play alone? Are they observing others in play? And so not only do we go back, my husband and I work together in our program, but not only do we go back and look at videos and photos for our own knowledge about the children, but we also use those to reflect with the parents and talk to them about how the children are engaging in play day to day, as well as reflecting on how they're growing over time.
I will play the video. Oh,
you can play it. It's okay.
Okay.
We also show the videos to the children so that they can go back and talk about their experiences in play as well. These 2 children are the same age, but you'll notice that the risks they take are very different. So you can see just a simple ladder already was used in 2 different ways by these 2 toddlers, which is kind of a testament to how open-ended materials really give space for a lot of different opportunities.
And I just want to note that when I watched this, I was compelled to be like, it just took me in the moment. If I would have been there, I would have been like, you did it, or you are showing her how to walk across the ladder when like, I think it's just natural as educators to want to like add and extend and add language. Um, but that also could end the play as well sometimes too. So again, I just want to reiterate what you said, Kate, about like this idea of stepping back and waiting doesn't come naturally to a lot of early childhood educators.
And it's kind of contrary to what we're taught a lot of times too, about scaffolding, about extending learning, about supporting learning. But if you were to give these children these 2 or 5 minutes to play on this ladder and at a different time talk to them about that experience, it would be the same support as if you interrupted the play in the moment.
And you're still there, you're still present, you're just not speaking to the children, you're just giving them space and time. I'll go ahead and play the other video you wanted to share.
This is an example of risk taking with a 1-year-old. So like I said, taking risks doesn't always mean danger.
Pide ayuda a un amigo. Pide a Luis.
So this is an example of how a child might take a risk to try to achieve something and maybe not achieve it the first time. Part of stepping back as an adult is getting comfortable with seeing children sometimes frustrated, sometimes upset about the fact that they can't maybe achieve a goal that they have. But what are we teaching? We're teaching them persistence. We're teaching them trust in themselves and that we trust them to continue to work on something that's really hard, which is trying to get into this swing alone. They may or may not have achieved it that day or any day soon, but had I just lifted them up and put them in, they would have lost the opportunity to try to, achieve that lofty goal for a 2-year-old.
And just want to make space to please feel free to put what you're noticing in the chat as well, or if you agree or even disagree with some of the concepts that you're hearing. I know for me, when I first watched this video, it's so clear and it's so different from what I've experienced that you, Kate, are not just jumping to problem solve right away. Even through like speaking to the child or like you said, lifting the child up, he's going up the ladder, he's trying to get in the swing. that's not working. So then he tries another way, and then he's like, actually, I don't want to do this right now. So he walks away. But you didn't step in at all during that. So that that really stuck out to me, that you're just not jumping in to problem solve right away and fix that. You're giving them space and respecting their ability to find a solution.
Yeah, and there in that environment there were older children, and so when they first asked me about helping, I said, "Why don't you ask another friend to help?" And that friend may or may not have been able to help in that moment. In the chat, someone says, "What if the child asks you to pick them up into the swing?" Well, it depends on the age of the child. Of course, this particular child had their, I probably at different moments would have picked them up and put them in the swing because they were little, but like maybe a 4-year-old, I wouldn't. I would have just said, swing on your stomach on the other swings. Or I generally do not push swings as a general rule because I noticed that kids who want to swing want you to push them the whole entire time, and I'm not willing to do that. And so we have swings that are low enough that they can swing in different ways independently. And this particular swing I had for the little ones. So I did pick them up sometimes and put them in it. So of course, it's not a blanket statement. It's not something that is not flexible, but just noticing that this child was trying to get in on their own, I thought it was important to support that and show them that I trusted that they could do it. I also know this child because they're my own child. And so I knew that there had been times when their older siblings had helped them get in that way. And so I didn't want to lift them up because I thought it was a good challenge.
I thought I
So
remembered that correctly, that was
yeah,
your
right, yeah.
baby.
So that's also something, like, each of you know your children really well. If you know a child is going to get so frustrated that it ruins their day, then you would pick them up and put them in the swing, or you would redirect them to something else. But if you know this is a child who likes to climb and is really good at climbing, you might support them in a different way. And that's what I chose to do in this video.
All right, and now we are going to talk about that reflection piece that we've been hinting at throughout the first hour and a half of today's presentation. Something that's really new and exciting and that I have not seen anywhere else being implemented in the United States, this idea of play stories. So every day, children are asked to draw a picture of their play. And then you, as the educator, transcribe their descriptions of that play. You talk about it. You ask those open-ended questions. You provide that language input that we know is so important for children and provide that space for reflection. Another component, too, is to have it displayed in the environment. And you could even, depending on the age, have children share with each other. And now I'll just turn it over to Kate because you have all the experience with play stories.
So play stories are a routine that we have every single day, generally after the morning playtime, which is the longest play, open-ended playtime we have, free play for our kiddos. And it kind of happens during the transition between play and lunch. And so it's a nice time for them to sort of calm their bodies down as well. Now, this is something we generally start with the 3-year-olds in my program. The 1 and 2-year-olds, we might give them, chalk to draw with at the same time to just be involved in the routine. But until they can talk and tell us what they're drawing, it's a little bit harder to, and sometimes it's just harder to have 1 and 2-year-olds opening all the markers when you're trying to clean up. So what we do is we invite the children with a really simple prompt that is, what did you play today? Tell us about your play today. What do you remember? And they can draw anything they want. The drawings, of course, don't look like what they say oftentimes. We've had children who will start by just speaking gibberish or saying words, and that's fine. That's all part of this, beginning storytelling and beginning reflection of their play. And so, and oftentimes children don't even draw their play. They'll draw, what's going on at home or something else that they're dealing with, which shows that it's a great opportunity for children to just be reflecting on their lives. We write down exactly what the children say. as a way to show them that we really honor what they have to say, that their voice is important. And similarly, you know, we display it in the environment for that same reason. We want them to know that they are the really most important people in our program. While the teachers are here to support you, it's the children who are the main players. Also, you know, as time goes on between 3 and 4 and 5, when you look at, sometimes, you know, every day you look at their stories and write it down, it looks like scribbles, it doesn't really make sense. But then once you put them all together and see how their drawings progress over time, their storytelling progresses over time, the things that they talk about and reflect on in their play stories really becomes a lot more evident. So there's a question in the chat asking, where do we write the narrative on a separate piece of paper or the same piece of paper? Generally, we write it right there. So there's one example here of a play story of a child who could write on their own. This was during COVID, so it was an older child. She was 6 or 7 at the time. But generally we will just write on the paper where the children are pointing to, just like you would, you know, label something if a child tells you about their drawing. And we try to display their work with their play stories. If we can take the photo of their play alongside their play stories, just like you can see on the slide here, it can spark their memory as well. This particular play story, this particular day was really significant to me because so they were playing on this chair right before we came in. It was like during the transition while everyone was cleaning up. And then when they each wrote their play story, it was so different, their interpretation of what was happening. I'm going to try to see if I can read it. So one child said, "We're in a car going down the smooth road. There's ups and there's downs on the road. We're yelling, and we went on one road that had rocks and holes in it, and we all fell down." And the children, there's like an initial for each of the children, and then they're all saying, "Ah." That was one child. The next child showed, this is a cat, and this is the gate. The cat wants to escape, and then it escaped, and we all tried to catch it. We were picking flowers, and then we took all the cats to school. Okay, so there are two totally different things happening in play for different children, right? They're both reflecting on the same play incident. And then the third person says, "We're in a car and we're going to get the rocks for food, and we're yelling because there's rocks on the road, and it almost makes the car fall down." So as you can see, each of the children is engaged in the same play, but they may be in their own imaginative world, right? And I know that we were talking in the small group, Maria was explaining how the children in her program sometimes have such interesting ideas and such out there ideas, she doesn't even know where they get those ideas or where they've seen that before. And I think that's something that's really interesting to notice, both by stepping back and letting the children take lead of that play instead of the adult guiding it, as well as sort of the reflection. And when children are older, they obviously have more and more to say about it. They have more detail. In just the drawings themselves, there's more detail, as well as I know that one person was sharing how she works with older children, school-age children, 7 and up, and there is and sometimes it seems like it's harder for the children to engage in play without the educator helping. And I think that when we step back and notice that about the children, that they don't really know what to do without our help, that's when we can show them we trust them by sort of redirecting them back to each other, right? I know that when I first started stepping back with children, there was a lot of children looking to me to solve their problems, looking to me to help in situations. And by redirecting them back to their peers, oftentimes that's when they notice and begin to trust themselves, begin to trust the other people, that they can, you know, decide on their game, they can play without the teacher telling them what to do or how to do it. But yeah, play stories are really powerful. This particular year, these children who did these play stories were 4. And so one of the parts of the routine were then after the play story, the children during lunchtime or when they were finished eating lunch before they would rest, we would give them the opportunity to share their play story. And so they would hold it up in front of the class, and it didn't really matter if they read it the same way or not, but they would explain to the class what they had drawn about. And I had one child who was very insistent that, like, you take 2 questions every time, you know, and so they were like, you know, and the questions would be like, what's the blue? What's the orange? Like, it didn't actually matter what the questions were. But I think the important part is just like lifting up their own voices and their own experiences as the most important part of the day. And if the child didn't want you to write on their story, sometimes we'll write on a Post-it or write on the back. So that's another option too.
I also just want to name and recognize too that you doing this every day and making this a routine and a part of your day, that's fine motor and pre-literacy skills and like pre-writing skills that children are learning and practicing every single day. And especially because it's part of your routine, because you might have children who never go to the art table and pick up a pen to write something down or to draw or scribble or do what have you. So that's a great way to introduce those pre-literacy skills.
Exactly. And in mixed age group, it's really great to see how the younger children already start imitating the older children. We had this group of 4-year-olds and we had a 2-year-old who entered that year. And she spent about 2 months. She really wanted to draw with them. And so she did her play story every day, a little scribble. And she would say gibberish words. She would be like, and we would just write down what she said. And then a couple months later, she started to say real words and tell stories. And so it was like her way, her pre-storytelling was with nonsense words.
It's just everything about the play stories makes me smile so much. And we have one more example of a play story if you want to tell us more about this fantastic drawing.
Yeah, so this is another child saying, this is me jumping on the blue cushions, but you can kind of see the child's bilingual language development here. We speak only in Spanish to the children, but of course our children are all bilingual because they live in the United States and have experience with other people in their lives who speak English. And so this person said, este es me jumping in the blue cushions. So you can see she goes back and forth with language, and the movement of the blue reminds me of her jumping. So I wonder if that was part of her thought when she was making it as well.
All right, and now we are nearing the end of our time together tonight. We are going to talk about the environment and the materials. We've already been touching on those pieces throughout, but now just in a more formal way, talking about how to set up that environment. What does it mean to be minimally structured and open-ended, and as well as freely accessible. So, and we're going to watch a video after on the next slide indoors in Kate's program, just talking about how, you know, you can organize your space with distinct areas defined by maybe the activity that might be happening in that area, but you're not restricting an area to only that type of activity. So really lifting up children's imagination and this idea of it being unstructured, where you want to bring the blocks over to by the dress up area to enhance your play, then that's okay with me.
Yeah, so the way that we keep our environment minimally structured is we basically have two main areas, right? We have like the messy area where, you know, there might be paints or there might be glue or other materials that need to be cleaned up. And then there is an area that's not the messy materials, right? And we use our environment, the furniture pieces to kind of define that depending on the age group. Sometimes we need a little bit more of a physical barrier. So we have some, you know, we'll put a shelf going sideways or something like that. But generally, when we think of the materials in our environment, we think about, you know, how many different ways can they be used? If they have only one purpose, is that one purpose because we as adults have been taught that that's the only purpose? Or is it actually just one purpose that they have? Now, one example, it would be like we have these plastic tubes that I think their original purpose is to make music. But one day we had a 1-year-old playing with this tube, and I took a video about 10 minutes long, and I counted 15 different ways she used the tube. She stood on the tube, she blew into the tube, she used the tube to knock on the gate, she rolled the tube, she stood the tube up, she interacted with another child with the tube, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it just goes to show that while, of course, there are some things that we, like scissors that maybe have one more defined purpose, we're not telling the children, you know, like what they can cut, obviously within reason. I guess I shouldn't say that. Yes, there are options for what they might want to cut in the area where the scissors are, right? You know, is it going to be paper? Is it going to be string? Is it going to be cardboard? That kind of thing. But also sort of, we don't have any defined activities that we do with the children with a specific outcome. We provide the materials that then they can interact with in whatever way they see fit. So sometimes it means just like pouring the glue and seeing how it drips, right? Or, you know, using the paint all over your whole entire body, or, you know, with your feet, or, you know, with different materials. And so similarly with the play areas we have indoors, you know, we have blocks, and we have an area with like play silks that they can put together in different ways, maybe clothing that they can put on in different ways, but we don't have a defined, you know, kitchen area or a specific area where there's only blocks. You know, we have a bin of balls, which are really interesting in many different ways. But we really try to, we've done a lot of culling of our materials in order to keep those that have the most amount of functions. Yes.
There's that tube you were just talking about, right?
Couches, their play couches are one of our most used materials. So triangular cushions and the square cushions are part of that.
There was a lot going on in that video, just the different types of play that is happening. I see a ramp in the back there. And again, there's no structure or order. You have your expectations set up, and children have the freedom and the space to play imaginatively and however they choose to do so.
Yeah, so we have 3 rules in our program. We can't hurt ourselves, we can't hurt others, and we can't hurt the environment, right? So that means like if someone's intentionally hurting someone else, we stop that. If they're intentionally hurting themselves, we stop that. If they're breaking something, we stop that. But other than that, we let them do whatever they want with the materials in a way that they choose.
Some great examples here. And some examples from your outdoor space.
So these large ladders were available in the space because we had a year where it was all 4-year-olds turning 5, and they were able to move the ladders and put them in place themselves. With the toddlers, they couldn't move those themselves, and so those aren't available to them. We have ladders that are like 1.5 feet tall that are available and that are easily moved by the toddlers, and so that's what they would have access to. In a mixed age group, we have materials that different ages could have access to, but obviously the younger ones aren't able to move the large materials, so they wouldn't be able to do that independently. There's studies that have shown that in fact kids are more at risk for getting hurt when the structures are built by adults, because oftentimes play structures are built high enough off the ground that if a child were to fall off of it, they could get hurt. But when a child is building their own structure, they're only going to make it as high as they feel comfortable climbing. So it actually provides a more safe environment for them. And in this case, if a 1-year-old had tried to climb up that ladder, they would get to about the second rung and maybe feel afraid, and then they would get down because we wouldn't help them.
This was such a big realization for me. My mind was blown. Like, yes, we make stairs for children to get up 8 feet off the ground. No wonder they get hurt more often on these play structures that adults build. So what a great way of offering this need of climbing and building large structures by having those ladders. So I love it. And just a couple other pieces that we've already touched on. This idea of it being open-ended. A block could be used as a brick in a castle. It could be used as a car. It could be used as a hat even. So there's so many different ways a child can use one thing. Like Kate was saying, that tube had 15 different uses in that 10-minute time span that she was filming that child. And a couple other adjectives to describe the materials that we've already been talking about. So it being movable, large, and sturdy, so it can withstand lots of use, and typically made with natural materials, because more often than not, that is what's going to make it really sturdy and long lasting. And I'll turn it over to you. Oh, go ahead, Kate. I was
just going to say there's a question in the chat about licensing and having issues with rubber matting below the play structures. And I will say that, yes, absolutely, it's important to have a soft fall surface. We have some mat where we have cement, we have some rubber matting that we have underneath it in order for the children not to fall on something hard. When it comes to grass, we generally, you couldn't see in that photo, but there's these blue mats that you can see in the photo there. We also have in our outdoor environment, and sometimes the adults would be the ones, if the children didn't put the mats out, the adults would be the ones to then put those nearby. This particular climbing structure, we were really close to the children because it was so high. And they were then jumping onto the blue mats. So that's what you can't see in the photo.
And
but
I
actually
thought we
went to from my licensor.
Can you say that again?
I learned about Anji Play from my licensor many years ago.
You did?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I figured we would end tonight by just reiterating just brainstorming and hearing from you, Kate, some ideas for different types of materials that are accessible that any program could get their hands on.
Yeah, so some of the kind of key materials that we have in our Anji Play program are the cushions, the mats, wooden blocks. These particular wooden blocks we just made out of 2x4s and 4x4s and just sanded them down, cut them up. We also have planks that we made out of like pickets from fences, just sanded down and, you know, covered so they won't weather in the winter. We also, there's a lot of different kinds of carts that you can buy or have access to where children can move things from here to there on wheels, as well as We've also taken wooden ladders we had and just cut them into small pieces, as well as, finding stumps from the forest or logs, as well as, tires are another open-ended material, and just any sort of cloth, like a sheet you could use outside or have access to. Something else we have outside are, access to sand and water and dirt and mulch, and, tools for digging and mixing and, buckets for moving them, as
Meat
well.
grinders.
Yeah, meat grinders. We have like the chalk they like to shave with the nutmeg shavers. They're like little, like little cheese graters, I guess. That's something that they use a lot outside. We do have some, we have balls and rackets and sticks that they use to play with as well. But it's very, very minimally structured in order for them to use their own imagination in big ways.
And I see that, is this the blue mat on the left, in that left photo that you were
In the left
referring
photo,
to
that's
earlier?
actually a 1 foot thick black mat, but yeah, it's a different kind of.
Oh,
But you can see in
okay.
that photo, there's a 1-year-old who's on the like 18-inch ladder, and then there's a 9-year-old who's on the 5-foot ladder, and they're both jumping, but they're on kind of like their own sized climbing tool.
And you are right there too.
Mm-hmm.
Just some other examples of materials you have.
Yeah, so these small ladders are what the little ones will move and use, oftentimes flat on the ground, like we saw before.
Like we saw, yeah. And for those who are involved in Satellite's accreditation system, so Satellite Family Childcare System is an accreditation system and a support system. And at the end of tonight's presentation, we will send a link to our homepage for you to find out more information. But if you are participating already, you have access to our equipment and unit loan program. So I'm just going to flip through a couple examples of high quality open-ended materials that would fit Anji Play's understanding of what could best support children's development. So our Outlast blocks, these are bigger blocks that are to be used outside. The Rigamajig, this is a type of material that would be best suited for like your older school-age child.
But also the little ones, use those in ways that you would not expect.
Thank you, Kate. Yes, exactly. The platform set, obviously for those babies and toddlers, for the, I imagine that child that we saw earlier climbing over the stumps, very similar ways that that could be used. Again, climbing, we have a little climber and the little rocker. The balance beam. So a lot of this big body play. And another example of an open-ended material, so our ramp set that is available to loan out. So we are doing great on time. I want to thank so much everyone for participating today. I know it's the evening. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Kate, for coming and sharing your knowledge about Anji Play. You really helped to make this very special. And I want to hand it over to you to tell everyone before I send out the evaluation about your deeper dive into this for those who are interested.
Yeah, so we've only just begun today, and I'm really excited that all of you have been interested in learning more about True Play and Anji Play in practice. We have a couple great learning opportunities coming up this summer, and which is kind of a deeper dive both into sort of the many years that I've been changing over time and learning in my experience as a teacher, as well as doing some video reflections and learning more about Anji Play, the environments, the conflict, the risk, and the learning involved through video reflections and talking with other educators about the experiences of watching children play. And we would love if you are interested in learning more and seeing how that could apply to your program. If you'd like to join us, I'm going to add to the chat here 2 different opportunities. There's 2 opportunities in English and then 1 also in Spanish. And so, shoot, the link for the Spanish language I will put in there again. You know, I'll have Grace send it out in the follow-up. It doesn't seem to be working right now.
That's all right. I can send it out to everyone who registered for this event too as more information.
Yeah, it'll be an opportunity. It's 3 dates and a little bit more time to dive deeper into these same topics and more information about it. So if you're interested in learning more, we would love you to join us.